Recording is on.
All right, so today's April 4th, 2021. We have a special Easter special, and we have Lierre Keith again as our guest. And we'll continue from our conversation last week. Do you remember how, I think Hugh, you had something, or you were continuing on an idea last week, right?
Yeah, we'll get back to that. It's basically our project and our plan for, and basically last-ditch attempt, I think, in terms of, trying mass psychology as a PSYOPs. So that's what we're trying to do. But I wanted to just talk a bit more about geoengineering and the reason why I think we were kind of, the last-ditch Hail Mary attempts to actually do something, because I think that people are starting to take geoengineering seriously now. I just posted something from Indian Minister of Energy, and basically they're calling to say that, well, it's, the rich countries should not only do carbon mitigation, they should, start drawing carbon out of the atmosphere and stuff, which is clear indication to me they're starting to manufacture consent for geoengineering. I wonder if you've heard of a guy called David Keith. I hope he's no relation.
No. I don't know who he is. He's definitely not a relation. So what is he going to put aerosols up or move the planet?
Yeah,
or what's this?
Yeah, he's been on this trip for a long time. He's a Harvard professor, and he's been calling for geoengineering for decades. He did a TED talk in about 2013 where everybody gasped at what he's proposing. But now there's been a shift in his direction, and particularly in sulfates, because sulfates are so cheap and dirty. They're inexpensive and quick. And so people are starting to talk in terms of actually using them. But what's amazing out of that 2013 talk is that he mentions this report 50 years ago that went to Lyndon Johnson about the dangers of climate change. And what they said to him then was, basically everything that's happened now, that we would get to 350 and then 400 parts per million in CO2. And they were very accurate on how much warming that would cause. But what's amazing about that paper was, or that report to him, was that straight out the gate, they didn't talk about mitigation. They said it's a serious, serious threat, but they thought immediately of geoengineering solutions. From 1965, the report was their first thought, not their last thought, was geoengineering. And fast forward all the way to today. I mean, all these billionaires, from Bill Gates to Richard Branson, they've all been funding these things for sulfates, because they're just so easy, and they've been proven by volcanoes, volcanic ash, the Pinatubo eruption, significantly cooled the earth, and so they feel that it's safe to do, but the consequences of it is acid rain. And I think it's the craziest thing known to man, because they're going to put, sulfates into the ocean. They're going to change the pH of the world ocean. And that's going to have a devastating effect on everything down to, cyanobacteria. If the calcium is going to leach out of, microorganisms, and they provide the oxygen. So they're going to be, they'll be putting our oxygen at risk if they're not careful. But I mean, it's so crazy. It's beyond belief, and it's starting to get traction, I feel. So I'm alarmed, and I think this is a 500 alarm bell, fire alarm bell call to say that we've got to stop these idiots. It's just unbelievable. But I'll let you comment.
It's the same kind of hubris that got us into this position in the first place. I don't even know what to say. Like, have they not read the story of Icarus? Did they skip that day in school? You're going to crash and burn. And also, why do these tiny little slice of human, there's 50 of them up there making these decisions for the rest of life, not even all the humans, but everything. if we put this to a vote, there's no way that every creature on the planet would vote to do something this ridiculous with our climate, this risky. Like, where's the precautionary principle in all of this? Yeah, there have been, volcanoes that exploded and changed the climate. And sometimes it was so bad that 90% of life on Earth died because the Earth got so cold so quickly and there wasn't enough sunlight. So why does anybody think this is something we should even be attempting to do? These systems are so complex. It's the level
beyond that,
that they just think they can understand it all and then somehow do what they want, and they can't. It's not possible for us to understand what the consequences would be, and it would be so devastating. Like, the risk is so huge. Why would you even let this? How does this even cross their minds? Like, it just blows me away.
So I've long thought that the whole situation of eco-destruction is a psychological problem. And the fundamental reason why I think geoengineering shouldn't be done is you shouldn't be trying a geoengineering fix for a psychological problem.
Right.
It's fundamentally flawed before you even left the starting blocks. But it's there are two things that are interesting about it. One of them is that they know that they don't understand the system. So they don't pretend that they know what they're doing, is the first remarkable thing. The second remarkable thing you said about them not letting us know, or we don't have a say in one of the most important things that will happen to our species, is that they know very well that 80% of the population is against geoengineering. So they're going ahead in stealth. They're just using the raw power and stealth. And they have such tremendous power that I think it's beyond, just doing a big expose. By the time you do an expose, they will be too far down the road in the big PSYOPs where they will convince the population. They can just terrorize the population into doing it. I mean, they just have to say, oh, climate change is way worse than we said. The Arctic is collapsing. We've got to do something now. And that 80% of people will flip to saying, yes, do something.
Yeah.
So we're in the deep psychological territory, and I think the way to attack it is with the PSYOPs. That's traditionally, psychological operations have been done for a long time in the military, and I think that's where we are now. What do you think?
Well, they control the mass media, so I mean, they could roll out these stories to make everybody get on board. I remember years ago talking to somebody who, sort of a strange little coincidence, but she actually was she was a woodworker, and she made violins, which is very specialized, clearly. And she had gone to this master class about making violins, and there was somebody else there who, for fun, this is what he did on the side to, stress relief from his job, and he ran the second largest PR and advertising firm in the world. So it's just massive amounts of control over people's lives. And what he said, almost laughingly, was that everybody in the industry knows you can tell people one thing, and then within 30 days, you can tell them the complete opposite, and they'll believe it. So it's not a lot of time has to pass between the one statement and the next, and you can get everybody pretty much on board if you let enough time go by, and that's not a very long amount of time, but they know how to do it. This, billions of dollars go into this every year. They know exactly how to make people agree to things, to, buy things, to change their behavior, to whatever, crazy new technologies coming along. So that's what scares me. It's just, I think if the powers that be want to do this, they know how, and they have the money to do it. I don't know from our end, what can we fight this with?
So there's, I've been trying to convince people of this for a long time. I've had a windfall recently because there's been a success in exactly what I've been trying to do, and that's what we mentioned last time with the Quebec Alpha November Oscar November cult. They are doing a massive PSYOPs. Now, the thing about PSYOPs, and it was successful, it almost brought down the US government. So it's about as successful as you can. It could reach China and places that are inaccessible to normal protest and activism. But the thing about that kind of PSYOPs is, in essence, what PSYOPs is trying to do, it uses consonance and dissonance. So what you were talking about there was consonance. You can get people together to believe in one thing. Eddie Bernays, for example, sold cigarettes to women. Women didn't used to smoke before the 20s, but he did it by saying, well, there was a big push for the suffragettes and freedom. And so he said, well, he got this advertising campaign and got it into Life magazine, got all these women smoking cigarettes and said, oh, they're freedom torches. And it was obviously phallic, he was using his uncle Freud's, thing. And basically Coca-Cola took that kind of graphic, semi-erotic stuff. But anyway, all the women there with, these cigarettes in their mouths, very phallic and stuff. And it caught on hugely and made it, women since then have smoked. He was responsible for 50% of the population smoking, which didn't, and countless deaths that must have come from that. Now that's consonant. It means getting people together for a common goal. So the other part of that that PSYOPs does is dissonance. So what normally happens is the U.S. State Department comes in, they try and bolster the narrative that supports, America and capitalism, and then they try and create dissonance in the narrative or the counter-narrative. Now, it seems to me that if in this situation, all you need is dissonance. Dissonance is easy. Consonance is difficult. It's hard to get people together to believe a narrative. It takes a lot of resources. But dissonance is easy, and that's pretty much what the Q crowd did. It's kind of like destruction and entropy. It's easier to destroy stuff than it is to build stuff. So you have to build consonance, but dissonance you just have to destroy. So it's kind of easy to break down, and it could be done. It has been done, with the Q crowd. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they did it, and 4chan does a lot of that too. And I mean, God knows we can see the influence they have across the culture here, certainly. How do you think we could do it? Like, it sounds like you have a plan. So what do you think would work? How many of us would be needed, and what would they be doing?
So,
in theory, yes. I mean, we've seen in living color how they've been able to do this. So how would we use distance?
So you can't have a master plan. You just have to feel your way. But the way forward, I think, is you start small with a small crystallized group, and essentially, it's a cult. It's really what you're creating as a cult. Q is a cult. Mm-hmm. I just made a video, so if you prepare to waste 3.5 hours of your life, I critiqued a video.
3.5 hours. That's a long video.
I couldn't help it because it's a critique of a TED talk.
Okay.
And the TED talk was about dismantling these Quebec guys. Mm-hmm. Quebec being, cipher. So you have to watch out for the keywords a bit. So the TED talk was very, very instructive, because in explaining what the phenomena was and how to tear it down with these cult deprogrammers, one of them is Stephen Hazen, and he's one of the prime mind control and cult experts in the world. And so they were discussing how do they get rid of this cult. In doing so, they gave a perfect how-to manual inadvertently on how to actually do it. So I thought it was so remarkable that I made commentary out of it and critiqued it as I went. Unfortunately, it was about 2 hours, so to critique it made it about
it's intriguing. I'm definitely intrigued.
Well,
send me a link. Where do I find it? I will definitely take a look.
Yeah, we'll send you a link. I'll post a link to when we put this video up, this recording of this interview up on YouTube. I'll post a link to it too. But yeah, it comes from alternate reality gaming. So one of the guys on it he claims he started alternate reality gaming. It's not really true. But what I've been trying to do is PSYOPs through alternate reality games since 2012. where I realized the situation was really far gone. And so I've been working on it. They were well funded. They were I mean, they had $4 million out the gate. So yeah, they're basically, this is big operations. But they really, what started it was disaffected people in the military. So the military, all these alphabet soup organizations have been doing this all over the world. And this is a case where the war comes home, when these guys come back from Iraq and stuff, they disaffected. And when they leave the military, they highly trained in all these subversive techniques and PSYOPs. And what they're doing now is using them against the civilian population. And that's what's curious. But there's no reason why other people can't do it as well.
The same thing.
And in effect, they're working towards the same goal. If you get over the politics and all the wacky stuff, it really is just to dismantle the institutions that are destroying this planet. So it's it has huge potential, and if you want to know the nuts and bolts of how to do it, it is all explained. I could explain it in less length, but alternate reality gaming is in essence a powerful format that people found. It came from a number of strands. There was Ong's hat and I Love Bees with a halo. It was used for commercial advertising and stuff. But what people found was if you make a cult atmosphere, people get absorbed in the narrative. People work from a narrative story. And it's almost the crazier the story, the better. I mean, it's really creating a religion. It's the same thing that, say, Christians, the early Christians are just a cult. And people say, well, how did Christianity get off the ground? It's such a wacky story. What they don't realize, the psychology of it is the wackier, the better. The more it creates bonding in an in-group. It's kind of like a test,
Sure.
So you're using all these techniques and basically just, and in essence, then you have to ask yourself, is this moral? And the moral question is, essentially you're making Manchurian candidates that will basically save the planet. But I'll let you talk.
I mean, I think we have to do everything we can at this point. The situation is so desperate. It's so desperate. And I mean, we're out here writing books and trying to get people to think a little bit about how maybe solar and wind aren't actually going to save us. And even that, we've gotten so much pushback. So I'm open to hearing anything. So I'm absolutely intrigued by what, where you're going with this. I don't know if we have the people to do it, but it might be worth a try.
Well, the thing is, I don't think you look for results and look for a grand success. You just move forward in that direction and just take opportunities as you can. You just opportunistic and take things one step at a time. But I certainly am convinced of the power of it. I mean, it's stunning. What's difficult about it is that people want to know how it works, how alternate reality gaming works, and they want to understand it first. But by definition, it's designed that you can't understand it. That's its strength, and that's the power of these PSYOPs. So they were done in Russia. The Russians took what America started, especially in the 50s, and the Russians call it active measures. And they developed it. There's a guy called Sarkov, and he essentially made Putin. But Putin runs PSYOPs all the time against us and against Crimea and people in Russia too. What's interesting about Sarkov was he would, get these far right and far left organizations, neo-Nazis and things, and then he would say publicly that he was funding both, which would just blow people's minds. And it's a deliberate and calculated thing so that people cannot make head or tail of it.
No, but it makes total sense.
Yeah.
You've got both extremes. Like, who else is going to just wreck everything? If that's what you're after, of course that'll do it.
but then it's a genius move.
Yeah, it
If
is.
you
It
don't
absolutely
say that that's what you're actually doing, then people's
Yeah.
heads explode.
I mean,
Because the
we've
idea is so
seen
that
the
they
same
don't know
thing
what to believe.
here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The idea is so that they don't know who to
Yeah.
believe. It's and it's perfect for like a post-truth world.
Yeah.
So what I think that we've been doing, and ecologists in general have been trying to reason with people and that are completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
And you can only go so far. At some point, you have to say, well, maybe it's better to switch and not try and reason them. Just completely confuse their own reasoning, so that you destroy the narrative for, say, wind farms and solar panels. Instead of reasoning with people and saying they're not going to work, you just make the dialogue. You need a narrative, and to say you need a Green New Deal and stuff, you need a narrative and a consensus, and they're good at drawing the consensus and manufacturing Greta to support it. And but you can almost, it's easier to actually just dissemble the narrative, so that people don't know whether energy transition is possible, and so they just can't get a consensus for it, and then it just doesn't happen.
Right. Well, I mean, here the Q people have been so successful that, I mean, I've seen so many people who are kind of in my sort of outer social world who are into all kinds of radical politics, and you would think would be stable, dependable people, and it's gotten them. I mean, they really believe most of it, and you're just going, how did this happen to you? So it's they've managed to get both the right and the left to go kind of crazy on this. And in fact, there were quite a number of people when they do the polling who would have been Bernie Sanders voters who voted for Trump. So it made that total horseshoe theory. Is there, like they did that. Whoever they are, they did that.
Oh my God, you mentioned the horseshoe theory.
Yeah.
Every time I mention the horseshoe theory, well, people on the right don't mind it so much, but people on the left, their head explodes. They hate the horseshoe theory.
People who do it.
Well,
Like,
that's
it
what
happens
I say.
before your eyes. Like, no, they just went total horseshoe. Like, I've seen it now.
That's what I say, and people say no. It's completely wrong. I say you just saw it before your eyes. You can see the horseshoe theory.
It's just millions of people have done that now. So I don't. Yeah.
So
no, it's quite real.
But here's the thing. An important part of alternate reality games and the stuff that people have been doing is this concept called game jacking or movement jacking. So what it turns into is movements are fairly easy to movement jack. It's happened to occupiers, it's happened to Extinction Rebellion. That's not, movement jacking is not quite infiltration, right? It's basically getting involved in the organization and then subtly steering it away.
Mm-hmm.
So what it results in is a competition for who's going to control the narrative. Whoever controls the narrative controls the movement. And so it becomes a very Zen-like game of chess, trying to steal them, who's going to herd the sheep. But at the end of the day, if you, like me, and I think like you, and I think of myself as an accelerationist, all we have to do is to stop the madness of this civilization. All these people are trying to get a narrative together that essentially saves civilization. And we're saying, no, we're just trying to accelerate its collapse so that there's something left afterwards.
Yep.
So in essence, we have a following wind. So they have the much harder task.
And plus the game, the approach with the game is absolutely like a defense from any type of attacks, because we're just doing a game. We're just, we've often talked about this.
Well, I think it's for the times. It's made for the times for a number of reasons. If you take, for instance, what's happening now in the UK, the policing bill that's going through, they're not going to kill the bill. That's going to go through. That's the end of street protest and the form of NVDA that XR was doing.
Right.
So that effectively, that's the end of traditional civil rights type protest in that format, like Occupy. You can't blockade anything. They'll put you in jail for 10 years now. So then I think it's a good thing. I think it's a blessing in disguise, because most kids are completely lost in the matrix online. They're all in cyberspace.
Yeah.
So and essentially the state owns the street. They've staked it out. They've prepared so well for, coming unrest in the street, mob violence in the street, that essentially you just have to cede that territory to them and move into cyberspace. In cyberspace, they're not nearly well prepared and staked out there. The law is not there. The mechanisms are not there. The only actors there are state agencies that have to maintain a low profile and they can't expose themselves too heavily, which is vulnerable for them. They can't come out in the open like a police force. They things like the NSA and stuff, which have to. They've got more to lose by exposure than anybody else. So they can't come out and fight directly. So it means that cyberspace is really open for contention, and the vast number of kids are on their couches as slacktivists, and that is where they want to be. They game. The boys are gamers, and the girls are on social media, and so that they're accessible there, and that's where the battleground is. Where it turns into the real world again is things like, if you just look at this Ever Given story,
right,
in the sewers, is basically, well, there's a fair chance, there's not a zero chance that that's not a kind of a Stuxnet operation. So the story unfolds, but there are a number of things. I think the latest thing I've seen, there was this little bit of a blackout on the ship, which is very suspicious. But it gives you an idea of what
do you think?
what you can do.
EMP, or do you think cyber attack, EMP attack? Have you got any?
Stuxnet was U.S.-Israeli attack on the Iranian centrifuges. They were basically making nuclear weapons. So what they did was they get in a little thumb drive, chuck it over the fence in one of these nuclear research facilities. Somebody sticks it in a computer, and that's it. The whole network is infected, even though it's isolated. What they did was they spun up the centrifuges. I suspect what they, it's SCADA, it's standard control protocol for machines around the world. So they got in the SCADA net, and they didn't completely reveal what they did, but what I suspect they did was they spun them up with harmonic oscillations and basically, essentially, kind of walls of Jericho thing, where you make different modes of vibration until you can bring them down. But they caused tremendous damage, and that's just controlling the speed of the centrifuge. So it was just a little computer virus. But there's so many groups that are doing this kind of thing that it's you just need a coherent narrative. Yeah. But are you stunned into silence?
No, I'm with you completely. I think it's absolutely worth trying. I don't spend enough time on this online stuff to even know where to begin. But if there's people out there like you who want to do it, you have my total blessing, and I do find it fascinating. So, whatever you want to tell me about how you might do it, I'm all ears. We got to try everything. We have to try everything. So, and I've always been intrigued by who gets to form the narrative and how they do it. That is something that my entire life has intrigued me. It's why every 4 years when we have the presidential election, I always watch the Democrat and the Republican, the national conventions, because they're rolling out their stories, and it's like, how are they making this believable? Who are they hooking here, and how? Because every single word is planned. So what's the story they're telling, and is this going to be compelling, and to who, and why? And I just have always found that so fascinating. So this is like a whole nother level of it, but I get it. Like, it is very, very intriguing. because we're storytelling animals. So there is something,
Yeah.
our brains just naturally want the story. So I get it that like if you can just, break it enough, then another story is there waiting. People will grab it. Like we've seen this with QAnon. We've seen this with all the crazy stuff. It didn't take much and they were all in. So how could this be used in defense of the planet?
Well, it's whoever
great.
wins the battle for the narrative is whoever has the most coherent narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't, you see, it's a mistake to think in terms of whoever has the truth or something like that. It's like the truth doesn't matter at all.
No.
It's just you can, fairies and goblins and extraterrestrial beings, as long as your narrative fits the human psyche better, it wins. So it's got nothing to do, it's who's got the most appealing story. So it really means that you have to understand psychology well and stuff. And it's not technical expertise, it's the kind of expertise that that you and Derek have in spades. And that's understanding the planet and the psychology. It's really people like you because you are narrative story weavers. So, but I think in the past people have been saying we must tell the truth, expose the truth, and you saying no, forget the truth. You got to, it's more important to save the planet than tell the truth. It's like, what if we told the absolute truth? We said the emperor had no clothes. And we're like, yay, you get a gold star for telling the truth, but like the emperor's just destroyed the planet. It's like, rather tell a story that brings the emperor down, even though it's untrue, is the way to go. So the example is, it really, to put it mildly, is you just go for the basal layers, the brain. Just the deeper the psyche is what you go for. So for example, you raised how they start this message and get it going. Well, take for instance something like gay marriage. Now gay marriage is such a big deal in the politics and stuff now, but people don't know the origins of it. And as far as I know, in fact, check me on this one, but as far as I know, it was running up to the 2008 election, maybe the parliamentary one in 2006, but I think it was 2006, maybe. And I think it was Lutz. Who's the guy, Bush's guy, who did all the dirty tricks? He was famous for doing dirty tricks for...
oh, yeah, he was like the power behind the throne. Oh, God, I can see his face.
Is it Lutz or something? Lutz? No.
No, that's not it. Oh, God, I can see him. What was his name?
Yeah, I can see him too. It's like...
I'm going to Google. This is going to drive me nuts.
Cheney? The Vice President Cheney?
No, the guy who did his dirty tricks campaign.
Cheney was part of it, but there was another guy too.
It was a guy who he went through as Bush's campaign manager for.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Jeff Starr, but it was.
Kenneth Starr?
Frank Lutz. Well, no, what was it? No.
Kenneth Starr? No. Kenneth Starr?
Ken Starr wasn't the one. He was
Ken
in on
Starr
it.
was the attorney that tried to get Clinton.
Oh, what was the name of that guy? Probably dead now. I can see his face.
George Schultz? No. George
Schultz.
Schultz. No, not George Schultz.
Yeah, he was in the administration too, but he's not the one that
we're not the one.
Oh, it'll come to us. I'm going to keep.
Oh, well anyway, you know the guy, but I think I think it was him, and what he did was he just did focus groups, and he got all these contentious things to manipulate conservatives, and got all these trigger issues, and they came up with this idea. They said, like, what about gay people getting married? And they got a reaction off the charts. So they found the polling, blew conservatives' minds, getting something. And what they did was they say you take something really sacred and, close to the heart, like marriage, and then you get something which is really a hot button issue for conservatives, like, being gay. And you put the two together, it was like nitroglycerine. So what they did was they started they started funding all these campaigns for gay marriage. And as far as I know, nobody had ever thought of gay marriage before. It was like, most gay couples, they just lived together and, took it as read that, you can't get a marriage license. They never even had the idea. But they sparked the idea of gay marriage for the election. And so about 6 months before the election, it suddenly became a huge issue and huge reaction. And they did it deliberately just to consolidate the vote on the right. So that's the kind of thing you need to do. You just think up these hot button contentious things like that, and then do a bit of road testing on them, and then really you try and get them started with fake news essentially.
Well, yeah. Looking for this guy's name.
It was just a kind of an example of the kind of thing that they have done in the past. I mean, it means, I think it really means a lot in terms of thinking what the narrative is,
Right.
and then trying to get a visceral reaction. But in general, they just go for the most visceral reactions and make a story, weave a story around it.
But what is very important in what you said, Hugh, is to start with a small amount of people and not try to gather numbers around a project like this, because it's the opposite that that's what they are doing.
Yeah, it's kind of a quality versus quantity thing. If a small group of people that are strongly aligned in one direction are with armies of people that are misaligned, you can't really do much with a large group of misaligned interests. So, but you can grow a small group of people that are like-minded. So it's kind of like GDR and stuff like that. You can. They become a center of attraction for people that are aligned in that way of thinking.
Karl Rove, that's who we're
That's
thinking
the
of.
one. That's the one.
Finally, I got his name.
Yeah.
Yes, it was
Karl
Karl
Rove.
Rove. He was absolutely the power behind the throne.
Yeah, but Karl Rove was doing PSYOPs. So
Yeah.
they call it dirty tricks, but it's really such. It's standard military techniques that the CIA would do to foreign governments in foreign elections. He was just doing it at home. But yeah, so all of these guys are worth studying, from Bernays to Karl Rove and all of these guys. But yeah, in essence, another good thing to study if you are into this path is if you look at the grifters, the old guys that did long cons, especially in the great age of grifting, like in the turn of the century. I think some guys like the Yellow Kid and these guys, they were brilliant psychologists. And in a lot of ways, those guys are misunderstood. There's something. They weren't as out for the money as most people assume. A lot of the grifters, they kind of thought of themselves as kind of missionaries, missionaries of God in a way, kind of dark missionaries of God. And their base tenet was, you cannot crook an honest man. Mm-hmm. They said there's no way you can pull a con on an honest man. So they said that they're doing God's work because they're getting dishonest people and giving them a lesson, taking a small profit on the side.
Right.
but they almost have, some of them, the really, really good ones that never got caught. I don't think is it the Yellow Kid? I can't remember. Some of those great ones, Cagliostro type con artists, they operated on quite a lot of different levels. Some of them were Freemasons, and they would put Freemasonry into practice. But they they are worth studying too, just their techniques and their psychology. But none of those guys, I don't think, the real masters, I don't think they spent a day in prison. They never caught those guys. They took fantastic fortunes. So the aim is, that kind of PSYOPs, in essence. And yeah, it's the reason why I warm to it and why it's so much my territory, although it seems strange to other people, is that I had my most formative years in occult when I was growing up. And it's not a good or bad thing. It was, very formative. But I came out of that cult absolutely convinced that everything was a cult. When I went into an American corporation, I couldn't tell the difference. I was like, this is a cult. I'll tell you all the techniques. You're using them in management techniques and employee indoctrination and stuff. And then America is a cult. The flag is a cult. The whole American. And so once you realize that, I thought, well, this is territory I really understand. So yeah, my aim is to just develop it as far as possible. Just building up and being opportunistic. But that's what I'm doing.
Well, I think it's fabulous, and I'm super intrigued. So keep me updated. If there's anything we can do to help, let me know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I mean, I can think of a million things, but in essence, just the writing skills and things like that. But do you have a project for a next book? Because I'm not kidding that we really do need something about geoengineering soon.
Yeah, I mean, we've already got a list of books we need to write, but I agree with you. Geoengineering is absolutely terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
It's coming up fast.
I know.
Can see it building up. Yeah.
They could just wreck everything. They could just wreck. I don't even know how it's a consideration.
Well, maybe we should start from there, because there's that could backfire very, very badly.
Yes, it will. It will.
No, I mean, not in terms of actually implementing it and having a physical disaster. I mean, psychologically, it could backfire, because it's one of those things that really is beyond the pale. So it seems to me that if you take that as you can get a very big visceral reaction.
Yeah.
So that's a very good starting point to weave a story that's around geoengineering.
Well, geoengineering is based on our civilization, industrial civilization, and we all in our group calling for deindustrialization for as long as we started to meet together. And the two things are completely linked. You cannot have geoengineering in a wrecked industrial military civilization. So we're going back to the thing we were talking at the start.
Yeah, you kind of build up to that. You kind of build up to a wrecking campaign. But you see, it's very easy to bring industrial civilization to a stop if the average person is against it.
Right.
So it needs day-by-day collaboration by almost everybody involved. If you get a defection of 1 in 20, it's unworkable. Global civilization would stop, because it can't work with 1 in 20 people wrecking it. It's in the Soviet Union, the biggest danger, especially in the Stalinist period. The thing that terrified them most of all was wreckers. And wreckers are just basically people that monkey-wrenched, the machinery and stuff in the Soviet Union. And so, yeah, why they were so terrified of wreckers is they were virtually impossible to stop or find or prosecute. And it became its own, what made wrecking so powerful is it used the paranoia of the establishment against itself. So that after a while, people would look at their own, screw-ups happen, but naturally. But then their paranoia would think it screwed up because there were wreckers, and eventually they could find wreckers everywhere. The more they prosecuted wreckers, the more they brought people over to the other side and made them disillusioned. It fed on itself remarkably. So wrecking is and stealth wrecking is tremendously powerful. So if you imagine a kind of a group, say like Freemasons or something like that, that have come. They've infiltrated everything, and then, you know, they have the same mindset. They have the same mindset that this all needs to be taken down. They're all clear on the how. They need to recruit very few people to basically bring everything to a stop. And that's the general principle.
How long have all of you been meeting? Like, how do you all know each other?
We found each other online. So yeah, so I've been working on this project since 2012. I spent a long time. I kind of went off on a path that was unnecessary. I kind of misunderstood the components that you'd need for an alternate reality game. But I launched my alternate reality game in 2018. And that was the first time I started in social media. I avoided social media like the plague before that.
Right.
But I got a bad education from, you know, going into social media in 2018. I didn't realize how far gone everybody was. I was very naive about where people's heads were at.
Yeah.
And I got a dose of salts when I first went online. And really, after that, I decided, well, we're too screwed, because if it's a psychological problem, the average person's head is so far behind where the ecological destruction is I can't see it flipping. You know, it's just to have a mass psychological change. It doesn't seem very hopeful. I mean, I think the climate tipping points might have passed last year. If they haven't passed, they're going to pass, you know, very soon. And then we're in bad trouble. So
we are. Yep.
Yeah. We've been basically talking about, as a group, all of us, for about a year, you know, maybe a bit more. And all this is we're putting things, we're doing all sorts of things. We're talking about all sorts of subjects. We're just laying bases, and Hugh is teaching us a lot of things. And so we've been meeting once a week for about soon a year, isn't it, Mike? That you started the recordings in June or May or June, but we started having the meetings at the first lockdown. We were starting to meet.
Yeah, I've been trying to movement jack Extinction Rebellion, because Extinction Rebellion is on the left and English, and you know, a lot of nice smart people. They very, very hard work, because they're just too nice.
Right.
And they don't really believe that there is a catastrophe. Half of them believe there is a catastrophe and half of them don't. But what I saw in Extinction Rebellion was, I read the tea leaves and I thought, okay, I'll give them a couple of years and they will crater, in which case there'll be a crop of disaffected people that I can recruit. And that's turned out pretty accurate. I did a video right when they started where I read them their future, and I got pilloried for it. And then recently people have come back and said, you were absolutely right. And I said, yeah, okay, now you're going to start listening to me. But I peck away at them all the time. And one thing I think that would be really good to do is the one thing the left has a very bad deficit on is the financial. They don't understand the importance of economics and finance. So in some ways, it's hard to exaggerate the financial part of it, but the system relies on finance. You could, in some ways, it's better to see the whole landscape. It's not in terms of ecology, not in terms of climate mitigation, or any one of the green initiatives. Is you should just think of it in terms of economics. And people on the left, they go to the social sciences and they go and study ecology and stuff like that. And so they have a complete blank spot about the markets and how the financial system works, which is the essence of the problem, and that's really the target. So they don't have the kryptonite, and it's very difficult to explain economics to them and stuff, even though I've tried. But the economic system is very, very vulnerable, and there again, the recent big successes, and that's like Wall Street bets have started to show people, oh yeah, maybe the ants can take down this elephant. But the Extinction Rebellion is starting to do a debt strike and rent strike. I've been hounding them to try and do a debt strike and rent strike, because that could really take off and be really devastating to the system. And they're doing it now. They need guidance. They just don't have the knowledge what to do. And unfortunately, they're not inclined to listen. It's like, liberal activists have a strong dash of narcissistic egotism, and so they're very good at listening to their own story, but they won't take advice from anybody. And so, so they're difficult to help. But yeah, that's I put a lot of focus into Extinction Rebellion and peck away at them. My next target is I want to carry on pecking away at Roger Hallam. He's distracted now with the London mayoral election. He started up a new party called Burning Pink, and he has this fixation on politics. If I could wave a wand and change the left in one way, it would be forget politics and politicians. They are useless. They are not the bear you think they are. You're barking up the wrong tree. They don't have any power. See, if the left knew about the financial system, they'd know that the politicians are just vassals. They're just puppets.
Yep.
So ignore them. You're going to COP26 and protesting is like you're completely barking up the wrong tree. But as soon as Roger Hallam is finished with the mayoral election, then they promised me I can get an hour of his time, and I'll try and convince him of some of this kind of stuff. But that's the essence of the plan. But would you mind just looking at the video as much as you can take of the 3 hours?
Oh no, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Just tell me how to find it or send me a link.
Yeah, we'll send a link.
Okay. Absolutely, yeah.
But okay. Does anybody have any more to say on that?
I think we should. Yeah, I think Lierre should look at that 3-hour video that you did, because but your comments, the way you've constructed the video, are kind of, for people who don't know what we're talking about, it's kind of just really laying the basis and the foundation of most of our talks around the ARG, and that illustrates perfectly the PSYOPs that they're using, the Q PSYOPs, and you can just change the names and see what we would like to do, and then we can maybe reconvene and we can go a bit further. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah, instead of thinking in terms of what you can do for us, think in terms of what we can do for like GDR and you guys.
We need everybody to read our book.
Yeah. Oh, definitely that. Yes.
Give us money. We need money. We're desperate.
Well, okay. Well, there's an interesting thing too. Maybe I should. Have you got much more time? Because you mentioned
just a few minutes. I gotta go soon, but yeah, okay. Go ahead. One more thought. Let's have it.
When I started on this ARG, I thought that the money is the difficult part, and what I realized was what a lot of people didn't realize. They thought that an ARG took money, and I realized, hang on. This could be self-funding. There's so many ways to monetize an alternate reality game. So I started from that point of view, and I started from the point of view of making an alternative currency to run the game, which makes it a lot better than e-begging and asking for cash. You run the game with the fake currency, a kind of the anti-Bitcoin, in other words.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of this part of it. Like there's other games where they do this.
Yeah, it's in essence, it's kind of tickets in Chuck E. Cheese. You know,
Yeah.
basically, you just you earn. Well, I made this currency called geodollars, and so you earn geodollars, and then you can use them in the game, and there are ways of monetizing them. You know, just by getting real world fiat currency out of it in a not in your face kind of way. So it's not. You see, one thing that can really turn people off from an ARG is it looks like it's done for commercial reasons, and that's what people are on the. They have their antennas up for.
Yeah,
Oh, this
sure.
is just a money making scheme and stuff. But yeah, it's not. It's just accepting the reality that everybody in the game needs money. So my idea is that we're all of the same mindset, and I'm not rich. So I need funding, but my idea is that everybody in the game, supports themselves in a modest extent. Like we're not of the mindset that we hedonists, and then we return the money to the game to expand it and grow it organically. But the idea is that everybody participates, especially the earlier incumbents, would be able to live off the game. And so I spent 5 years writing the software and stuff for the alternate currency. Then realized.
Goodness, you've really gone all in with this.
Yeah, because I realized in 2012. I mean, I've been trying for my whole life. Really, I've been an anarchist, but I tried everything. I tried to beat the system from the inside. I tried to make a green company in 2000. I tried to make an employee-owned company. I exhausted every avenue, and everything taught me that it's all psychology. That you can't approach it from a technological point of view. I tried everything from glass initiatives and getting technology for recycling and alternative energy, and I mean in the 2000s, and trying to get an innovative company and trying to bring down the financial system by having a successful model for a company. So I've been bootstrapping green companies before that was in vogue. But it always came down. It always taught me that the guy, it's the psychology of the people is not ready for it. It's the way I say it is, you can take the slave out of the plantation,
right?
But you can't take the plantation out of the slave.
Right.
And that's it. So what I realized was you've got to get the plantation out of the slave. That's the main thing. Then releasing the slave from the plantation is easy. But yeah, my thinking since 2012 is that the way to do it is with an alternate reality game. And it just so happens that alternative reality game is something I know very well, which is a cult.
Right. Well, this is clearly you were born to this, so.
Yeah, I do feel a bit that way. But
I get it, yeah.
But it's, yeah, I'm a terrible doomer. I do think it's a bit too late, but I'm kind of with Michael Mann in the way he's thinking, like, well, there are levels of being screwed, and there are, even if it's too late, if we passed all the climate tipping points, and even if we go extinct, there are various ways this movie can end, and some are a lot worse than others. And what I feel is we're on a trajectory for a very, very bad movie. Yeah. And, you could, almost anything is better than what we're on. So you can almost do no wrong, is what I feel.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
All right, well, send me the link to your breakdown of the TED Talk. I will take a look, because I do find this very intriguing. And I should probably go because I got to be somewhere else. But
okay, well, thank
you. Talk to you all again. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you definitely get my head spinning. So,
well, we'll do our best to read and promote your book.
Very good. Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, guys. See you later. See you soon. Bye.